Welcome, viewers, to the Inside Interviews podcast, which is an enlightening series of academic discussions taking a deeper dive on a variety of unique topics. After this episode, be sure to check out previous ones on our website, YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform. Today, we're pleased to have Dr. Alessandro Cancian. He is a senior research associate at the Institute of Ismaili Studies in London, where he works on Shi'i Sufism, Quranic exegesis, and the intellectual and religious history of early modern Iran. A historian of religions and anthropologist by formation, he has published books and articles on religious education in Shi'i Islam, Shi'i Sufism, and Quranic exegesis. He edited Approaches to the Qur'an in Commentary, Iran, published by Oxford University Press in 2019, and his monograph on early modern, the Emergence of Shi'i Sufism, was published in 2023 by Oxford University Press. He is an amateur perfumer, and among other projects, he has created a bespoke fragrance for the exhibition, The Qur'an, Form, Fragrance, and Feeling, London at the Aga Khan Center on the 22nd of September 2023, running until the 20th of May 2024. And he is translating a 19th century treatise on perfume making written by an Iranian Sheikhi master. We're so pleased to have you today, Dr. Cancian. And the subject of your book, entitled The Emergence of Shi'i Sufism, Sultan Ali Shah Gunabadi and his commentary on the Qur'an, has been a personal interest of mine for some time. And I'm always discussing with my colleagues in Shi'i studies, or just general in Islamic studies, about how different religious identities intersect with each other, especially in the Islamicate or Islamic framework, and how they become something new, right? And how different religious groups find things in common, the good things they want to take from this group, the good things they want to take from this group, and a kind of, and we'll get to this a little bit later, but a kind of syncretism almost takes place of some sort. Or at times even a confessional ambiguity may be there. And especially in this case, dealing with Shi'ism and Sufism, this has such a rich and historical interaction, right, between the two groups. And as you demonstrate clearly in this book, they become inseparable in many ways in the context of Sultan Ali Shah Gunabadi. So the subject itself is absolutely fascinating, and I really, really enjoyed the book, and I'm going to use it. I'm teaching Tafsir at the moment, an undergraduate course in Tafsir and Quranic exegesis, and we're going towards the end of the course, but I'm going to definitely put this in a chapter or two for the students to read, because I really do think it is a wonderful contribution to the field of Shi'i studies and Tafsir, as well as the study of Islamic mysticism or esotericism. So before we get to that, if you want to just briefly discuss the trajectory of Shi'i Sufism, right? It's right on the title. Shi'i Sufism. What is Shi'i Sufism?
Thank you very much for the introduction, to my own work, and for your introduction to the subject. And by the way, you've touched upon a couple of issues that are recent, particularly after getting this book published. Got me almost obsessed, and one of them is exactly the issue of group formation, confessional ambiguity, and so the problem of when is it that a group becomes a group, both from the point of view of the group's own self-understanding, but also from the point of view of us scholars who tend to, and of course we need to establish categories, because otherwise we wouldn't have anything to talk about if we didn't use categories. Even sometimes reading those categories upon certain phenomena that perhaps are not entirely amenable to be pigeonholed into clear-cut and precise categories. So the reason why and then I'm coming to your question, but the reason I really think it's really important to set the whole conversation by stating this couple of principles. The reason why I started to reflect more in more depth on group formation, orthodoxy, heterodoxy, the boundaries between a group, is that so one of the perhaps the boldest statement that I make with this book is in the title, is the emergence of Shi'i Sufism. So Shi'i Sufism. So I was debated, and I've been talking with colleagues about whether to call it the birth of Shi'i Sufism. But then I settled for a more, if you want, gentle definition: the emergence of Shi'i Sufism. It's because my assertion is that Shi'i Sufism, in the proper sense of the expression, I think emerges in the 19th century, and I claim that this Tafsir by Sultan Ali Shah is in some way the act of birth of Shi'i Sufism. I know it's bold. I know it's strong. It's questionable, but it is, as a matter of fact, to my knowledge, the first time in history where we have an entirely Usuli 12 Shi'i, an entirely Sufi order, Sufi mystical order. So both legacies are claimed and reclaimed by the author, and I think for several reasons that we might or might not explore in the following minutes. But for some reason, I think the author with this, with writing the Tafsir Bayan as-Sa'ada, makes a statement himself on the legitimacy of the entire tradition of classical Sufism, as well as the entire tradition of 12 Shi'ism, in a very specific, in a very peculiar setting, which is Qajar, Iran. So, but coming to your question, you ask, how did Sufi ideas become incorporated into mainstream Imami 12 Shi'ism, right? So I think that again, some criticism of the question is due here, in the sense that I don't think that we really can talk about Sufi idea, at least at the beginning, Sufi ideas being incorporated into Imami 12 Shi'ism. I think the key issue is here is that of esotericism. So there is a significant amount of esoteric traditions being alive and circulating in both Shi'i circles and Sufi circles since the beginning, since that since even these two traditions became what they then became. So before we have Imami 12 Shi'ism, of course, and before we have Sufism as a mature movement, we have esoteric ideas circulating since the beginning of Islam. We have that in the Quran. We have that in the corpus of the Hadith of the Prophets. We have in the corpus of the Hadith of the Imams. And in a way, this esotericism permeates the two, these multiple traditions since the get-go. And of course, then we have the historical trajectory in which we have two religious movements, two religious schools that take shape and begin being called with the name of Sufism and the name of 12er Shi'ism. Then we also have Ismailism, which plays a huge part in the relationship between these historical phenomena. Then, as long as Sufi ideas, esoteric ideas that we can identify as shared between the two traditions. So we have a number of them, which are, well, I think the main one would be the idea of walaya, which of course is prominent in Shi'ism, and it's taken by early Sufis, whether in personal contact with the Shi'i Imams, whether through other channels. There's not much. So we have a degree of ambiguity in the early sources. We don't. Some of the early Sufis, which are being identified as Sufis who were in contact with the Imams by later Sufi Shi tradition or Shi'i Sufi tradition, have sometimes a legendary aura upon themselves. It's the case of Hassan al-Basri, which many Turuq in Shi'ism affirm was in touch with Imam Ali, or Maruf al-Karhi, which features in the Ni'matullahi silsila, being a disciple of the eighth Imam of Shi'ism, Ali al-Rida. And so we have many cases of early Sufi personalities who are said to have been in touch with the Imams. Something happens at the time of the minor occultation. Something happens after the eighth Imam Ali al-Rida, and that is the time where we do not have claims to further association between the Imams and the Sufis. And in fact, Sufis are even condemned by some hadiths of the Imam following Ali al-Rida, which again calls into question the method later Shi'i Sufis used to justify or to explain or to interpret them, but this is another matter. And something also happens at the time of the minor occultation of the 12th Imam, where we see an explosion, a huge proliferation of mystical, Sufi, occult movements. But that is the time where the every single tradition becomes more and more identitarian, becomes more and more vocal in claiming a specific and sometimes exclusive identity. A lot of these esoterical movement have roots in Iraq. In Iraq, in the 9th century, 8th, 9th century, many things seem to happen in Kufa. And if we consider,
are you referring to the Ghulat or the different groups surrounding?
Sorry.
Would you be referring to the Ghulat?
Yeah, also the Ghulat, but also but then again, it's very difficult to isolate the Ghulat from the non-Ghulat within early Shi'ism, and also within Sufism. It is not. I mean, yes, of course, if we adopt a heresiological lens and look at the heresiographers, of course, we have the different sects very clearly identified and separated from one another. But that's
which is
not
post-mortem anyhow. So
yeah, exactly. It's not the reality on the ground. It's not the reality on the ground. You have many personalities who were gravitating around mystical masters or Sufis or the Imams who would profess at certain points in their life ideas that later would be identified with the Ghulat, but we cannot really establish a neat divide between the Ghulat and the non-Ghulat. So no, I was trying to refer to the portrayal of the history of early Shi'ism by Amir Moezzi, who in a way identifies the development of early Shi'ism into a deeply esoterical, politically quietist, Ghulat-like movement at the time when the chances of Shi'ism to vindicate its own claim to political power become impossible. That is no longer viable, and according to Amir Moezzi, in contact with Gnostic, even non-Muslim movements active in Kufa at that time, Shi'ism becomes Shi'ism incorporates many of the esoteric elements that later became typical of esoteric Shi'ism, but also of Sufism. I don't know
great.
if
So I just wanted to clarify this a little bit. So Sufism, if we were to define it as and now by here we're assuming that there isn't that it's not a part of Shi'ism, Sufism that adopts the main what would become Sunni beliefs regarding the first three caliphs, regarding predestination, regarding all of those other things, like a Sunni spiritual path of experiential spirituality that most likely adopts some form of Ash'ari theology, which is talking late, this is at a later period, which has a specific group, specific litanies and liturgies that they perform of what would maybe be described as high Sufism.
Yeah.
How did this Sunni self-experiential spirituality find its way into Shi'i thought, or Shi'i thought finding its way into this? So you kind of laid it out, but do you want to give perhaps some concrete examples? Because all of this is of course vital to your work, right? Is to what happened centuries and centuries later, but there were certain vital moments or vital figures or
absolutely.
People whose writings or ideas had to have had an extremely profound impact for Orthodox Shi'is who have a set of beliefs regarding infallibility by this time. So let's talk about high Shi'ism. So like by the 4th century, right?
Yeah.
Infallibility, belief in the occultation of the 12th Imam, disassociation from from those who don't accept Ali and the Imams. These definitely become identity markers. So it seems like oil and water in some senses, theologically speaking. How does that I want to change, but what happens?
Well, okay, so I think the key moment where we can see a stream of ideas moving from one camp to the other, if you pardon this possibly brutal metaphor, but I think it's a Mongol period, or let's say, the post-Alamut time. Of course, I think we must assume that she is kept in some environments, in some circles, esoteric, initiatic practices, because we have that in the Hadith, and we have that prominently. Then we have the Buids and the rationalization of Shi'i theology, but everything is still there. I mean, it cannot, and it wasn't explained away like an incident of history. It's there and it's prominent. And even if we assume the existence of exoteric Shi'ism, we still have the Imam. I mean, the Imam, the Imam has esoteric feature in itself. But then, of course, we're talking about the period between, the first, up until the 4th, 5th century. Then we have the Mongol time, which is the Mongol and post-Mongol time, which is a time where we have extremely, to begin with, we just had in Sufism Ibn Arabi. And this is a capital moment for mystical Islam in general. And such is the importance and the impact that Ibn Arabi has on the entirety of Muslim thought, that his impact is felt in Shi'ism, in mystical Shi'ism as well. I always tend to say that Ibn Arabi is to Islam what Plato has been to Western philosophy, Greek philosophy, if you want, but even Western philosophy as a whole. In the post-Mongol time, we have some personalities that begin to incorporate Ibn Arabi's metaphysics into 12-verse Shi'ism, of course, from the vantage point of those ideas in Ibn Arabi which are already there in Shi'ism, like the wilaya is the case of walaya or wilaya, and how Haydar Amuli, Sayyid Haydar Amuli, in the 14th century reworks it in 12 Shi terms is illustrative of the impact of Ibn Arabi on 12 Shi mysticism and 12 Shi Sufism. And then later on, well, of course, we don't have only Haydar Amuli, who is probably the most celebrated. Then we have in the following years, we have Rajab Bursi, Ibn Abu Jumhur al-Ahsai, and then we have a number of personalities that, again, navigate in that ambiguous, in that confessionally ambiguous space. One case is Voize Koshefi, who was a Sunni. He was probably a Naqshbandi Sufi, and he authored a work that became incredibly popular among the Shia, the Rawdat al-Shuhada. You know, even today, the name Rawda, Rawze Khani in Iran,
the Maktab,
takes its name from the work of from the Rawdat al-Shuhada by Voize Kashafi, which was an Alid martyrology focused mainly on Karbala, and he was probably a Naqshbandi Sufi. Then we have from the Mongol period. Then we have the other incredibly important moment, which was the establishment of the Safavid state, and the I don't like to call it the conversion of Persia to 12 Shi'ism, because first of all, it wasn't a conversion, and secondly, I think that affirming that Shi'ism became the state religion of the Safavids is a bit of an anachronism. But anyway, we have this moment where Persia becomes at least the king becomes a Shia. Yeah. So Iran. Yeah.
Just to interject for a moment here.
Yeah.
Just so I can imagine this correctly and the listeners can imagine. You have the Safavid Empire now. You have a Shi'i king or Shi'i ruler or whatever we want to call him. And you have all these Sunni spiritual guilds that are already existing in the Iranian plateau, all over Iran, Khurasan, all over the place. This, what I call the Sunni path of self-introspective experiential spirituality. It's a lot of words, but Sufism, let's just say. And it's really ingrained into the everyday society. It's not like something, you know, and they have their groups and their spiritual programs, and they're also ordinary Muslims. I mean, they pray, they fast, they do all of these other things, but they follow a specific kind of spiritual program, so to speak, and it's initiatory as well. So this already exists. Now you have 12er Shi'ism being ushered in to the Safavid, through the Safavids, as becoming, you know, at least the religion of the ruler. And then he's bringing, I forget which one, Shah Ismail, I forget the names now, but one of them decided to bring, or at least a couple of them, to start bringing scholars from Lebanon and other places.
But since the beginning, since Shah Ismail,
right? Since Shah Ismail, Wow. Okay, so now what will happen? I mean, this is you just kind of set the stage, right? So
something paradoxically happens, which is that a quasi-Sufi ruler. I say quasi-Sufi because the Safavids were, of course, one of these let's call it ghulat for the sake of mutual understanding, but it's a esoteric movement with strong Shi'i traits, strong Ali traits, that comes to rule a huge polity and a huge population, corresponding to roughly to today's Iran, and what happens, I think, is that the ruler realizes that it's not possible to rule a polity without the legitimacy provided by, I would say, a more governable mainstream religion. I think that Shah Ismail realized that, well, of course, the religion of my polity cannot be the religions of the Qizilbash, cannot be this extreme, extremely esoteric and extremely, I would say, esoteric movement.
An example, maybe, so that.
Sorry.
Can you give an example so we could perhaps, like, what's an example of an esoteric belief at that time, or an esoteric
Well,
practice?
I mean, famously is the veneration of Imam Ali to the point of divinization of Imam Ali. That is something that, again, reading the sources, the early sources of 12th Shi'ism, even those sources that are considered authoritative by the theologians that flock to Iran to provide the Safavid state its legitimacy, have elements of that over veneration of Ali to the point. I mean, look at some of the sermons of, comes to mind the Khutbah Tutunjia by Imam, which then became very popular during the Qajar times. So the Qajar times is a very interesting time for many reasons. So the intellectual discourse in Qajar times is replete with elements that come from what we would understand as being ghulat. But yeah, see, this is one example. And also the parallel with the divinization of Imam Ali, there is the veneration which borders divinization of Shah Ismail itself, of the Safavid master slash king himself, and the Qizilbash, which in later Safavid times get marginalized, are an example of that kind of veneration for him.
Which is rooted, you would say, in this claim to access to paranormal powers, or some kind of ulum ghariba, like this whole kind of idea that, you know, what you see is not really what you see. Like there is something more that lies beyond the, because again, we want to kind of define esoteric as well here, right? So just so the listeners, everyone can kind of be clear what this is, right? Because esoteric could mean a lot of things, but I mean, as far as I recall, please correct me, or I mean, was Shah Ismail, or one of the early founders of the Safavid state. I mean, they even claimed to know the Mahdi, or to eventually be the Mahdi himself, or something like that. Like there were some pretty grandiose claims.
Yeah, well, there is this ambiguity. There is even Shah Ismail himself plays with this ambiguity of him being a manifestation of Ali or the Mahdi himself. There is this, of course, but this is something that surfaces at different stages in 12th Shi'ism. I mean, this playing with the idea of, yeah, of course, I'm not the Mahdi, but I could be. Is that we can see that also in the 20th century in some points, even nowadays. So yes, but more than that is the veneration that the king would command over his disciples, which was really bordering divinization. As long as the ulum ghariba are concerned, I wouldn't go as far as including the ulum ghariba as something bordering ghulat, as in at that time the occult sciences were very much respected and almost mainstream in a way. There was no ambiguity. For example, for any ruler, but I'm not just talking about the Safavids, but all the rulers at the time had experts of occult sciences working for them, employed by the court, and usually they also were theologians or ulama in general who considered the idea of having an influence on the natural world by resorting to certain practices and techniques as totally acceptable and respectable.
And both Shi'ism and Sufism
absolutely
are part of that broader world. And now here we come to this kind of fertile moment, or whatever, I mean, this opportune moment over centuries, of course, for what the book title states, the emergence of Shi'i Sufism, right? Which,
yeah, absolutely.
And there are two particular Sufi orders that you mentioned throughout the book. So I think it's important to discuss it. One is the Kubrawiyya, the other one is the Ni'matullahi. Just for our listeners and for those who will be reading the book, tell us a little bit about both very briefly, just because they both are so central to the story. The Kubrawiyya earlier on, and then of course the Ni'matullahi.
Yeah, well,
these two groups, but you do make mention of both of them, throughout the work. These two Sufi groups.
Of course, the Kubrawiyya is a very peculiar Sufi order. Whose development rests upon mainly, two highly influential and highly celebrated and very original and intellectually interesting personalities. Najmuddin Kubra, who died in the early 13th century, and Alauddin As-Simnani, who died in the early 14th century. So why is the case of the Kubrawiyya peculiar? Well, first of all, because it has and it shows a lot of Shi'i elements since the beginning. Now, probably the Kubrawiyya, so Najmuddin Kubra was a Surawardi Sufi who became so important as to become an eponymous of a different independent tariqa, independent Sufi order, so both Najmuddin Kubra, but particularly Simnani, have a number of we don't have the time to go into detail about that, but for example, For Simnani, Simnani in a way recognized the 12 Imams, and he was of the idea that the 12th Imam, the Mahdi, actually disappeared. So there is a coincidence between the 12 Shi'i belief on the occultation of the Imam and Simnani's idea that the 12 Imam went into Ghaiba, went into occultation, but he would have reached he would have become so high in the spiritual hierarchy, the esoteric spiritual hierarchy, to become the Qutb, and to go into occultation because of his high rank. But then he said that he died of natural death 19 years later after going into occultation. This is one interesting point about Simnani. So, but the idea is what I think the Kubrawi masters tried to do was to reconcile, in the name of Sufi esotericism, the two great families of Islam. We are in Transoxiana in northeastern Iran. This is the it was a particularly difficult and troubled time, and I think that Simnani sought to reconcile Shi'ism and Sunnism, Shi'i Islam and Sunni Islam, in the name of Sufi esotericism. Then what happened to the after Simnani is that the Sunni lines of the Kubrawiyya dissolved in the 16th century, with the exception of one Chinese branch, which kept on being alive. So the Sunni lines merged with the Naqshbandiyya, mainly in Central Asia and then later in India. But then the Shi'i derivation of the order, through a very peculiar and interesting process that if you want to know more about, should refer to Atan Zali's book, which is an exceptional source for the development of the Shi'i lines of the Kubrawiyya, and that's the importance of the Kubrawiyya in the whole picture of my book, developed into what today up to today in Iran is called Irfan, gnosis. We can call it gnosis, which is which is the term by which non-Sufi mysticism is today called within 12 Shi'ism. Yeah. Well, also Sufi. Well, also the Sufis refer to their doctrine as Irfan, as gnosis. But the historical roots of the term lie within the development of the Kubrawiyya into the Nurbakhshiyya and later the Zahabiyya.
So that was the Kubrawiyya. Yeah.
Yeah. So the Ni'matullahi, okay. Obviously, Sultan Ali Shah was a Ni'matullahi Sufi. The Ni'matullahi is one of the great historical orders, Sufi orders, established in the 15th century by a mystic poet, metaphysician named Shah Ni'matullahi, who came from Aleppo and then established under the Timurid in Persia. It is initially a Sunni order, with, of course, if you go and read the works of Shah Ni'matullah, there's, of course, there's a huge, there is the huge weight of the veneration for Imam Ali. And of course, today, Ni'matullahi Sufis go to those parts of Shah Ni'matullah's thought to prove that, well, it wasn't really Sunni, it was a Shi'i Sufi order since the beginning. I think this, all of this labeling doesn't really make any sense in the case of the 15th century Sufism. I think that what was important was the mystical practice and the esoteric doctrines that were promoted by this master, and in this case by Shah Ni'matullahi. So Shah Ni'matullah's heirs moved to Deccan, to India, invited by the Bahmani kings in Bidar in Deccan, and now is the time where I may share my screen, and
sure. Go ahead.
So Shah Ni'matullah's successors, who happen to be his sons, moved to India under the Bahmani dynasty, and at some point, the Bahmani were Shias, right? We don't exactly know at what point, at which point precisely in history the heirs of Shah Ni'matullah become Shia, because from the early 16th century up to the 17th century, of the masters of the orders of the Ni'matullahi order, we only have the name. We don't really know much about them, except few datas that are reproduced. I think that there might be information buried in some libraries in Deccan which awaits research, but we don't really know much about them. But then the master re-emerged as active, producing masters, leaving historical records in the 17th century, and then re-emerged as Shi'i master, 12-verse Shi'i master. Of course, the deep elements of classical Sufism, syncretic elements are still there, and in fact, I think that the process of becoming entirely and fully 12-verse Shi'i ends up in the 19th century in Iran, when they come back. And they come back at the end of the 18th century. When we are here when Sultan Ali Shah travels back to Iran on a mission to spread Sufism in Iran, in Persia. So the context is the context of the struggle for power between the Zand and the Qajars, and the masters and Masum Ali Shah and his disciple Nur Ali Shah Esfahani get entangled not only in the struggle for power, but they get entangled in the struggle for religious authority. So the Sufis, the Ni'matullahis, come back to Iran. They are highly charismatic. They manage to gather a large following since the beginning. And of course, the ulama starts to, well, they're not happy about that. A number of subsequent waves of persecution from the ulama begin, which brings to the execution of some of the Ni'matullahi masters. After which the masters, the Ni'matullahi masters, since Hussein Ali Shah Esfahani, who died in the early 19th century, change strategy in a way and become to put aside the charismatic elements of their teaching, and they become people of the house, people of the madrasa. They mingle.
To integrate into what is quote unquote mainstream 12er Shi'i.
Yeah, I don't like the word 12er mainstream 12er Shi'ism. I don't think that such a thing exists. But yeah, they probably realize that in order for the teachings to survive, they have to compromise on. Perhaps not compromise, but they have to install in a more acceptable framework, which is the framework of the official religious authority, the madrasa-trained ulama. And in fact, Hussein Ali Shah is a mujtahid. And among his writings, there's nothing that let anyone suspect that he may be a Sufi. He writes and talks and lives as a 12er Shi'i Alim, which he was, in fact. And that is the second generation of master. We have three masters up until the mid 19th century, who are mainly people of the madrasa. They are ulama and Sufi masters at the same time.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Because we're getting to Sultan Ali Shah Gunabadi now.
Yeah.
What would make this individual, let's say Hussein Ali Shah Isfahani, he's a mujtahid, studied in the madrasa, he's a Shia, believes in 12 Imams, so on and so forth. Okay. What would make him different from, let's say, one of his colleagues at that time who was also a mujtahid?
Yeah, the fact that he had disciples, and he was initiating disciples, and he was transmitting, Sufi teachings to his disciple, and that he nominated, appointed a successor.
So it's a quick question again, just for clarity. So how did they, as Shi'is, or square that or reconcile that with the idea that absolute authority belongs to the 12th Imam?
That's a very interesting point. So
clearly they would be accused right away as competing with the Imams walaya.
Yeah, because their leader were called Qutb, Pose, which is a
title given to the
a title given to the Imam. Yeah. So the device through which they reconcile the existence of a hidden Imam, who is the supreme authority, even the supreme initiatory authority, is to develop the idea of a walaya, of a solar walaya, a main walaya, which is the line of the Imams, and a lunar walaya, which is the line of the Sufi masters. So the authority that the Sufi masters enjoy is only a shadow of the authority, is enabled by the authority of the 12 Imam, who is living and is providing them with the authority they need to initiate disciples to the knowledge of the Imam.
And that brings us now to Sultan Ali Shah. And we left him to the end because we wanted to build up everything up to this point now, right? That now we're in the, well, he died in 1909, so we're in the late 18th century. No, 18th, not 19th century.
19th century, yeah.
19th century, excuse me. What an, you know, I was reading the chapter on his biography that you had written. All of these, or I wouldn't say all of these, there's so many of these spiritual masters or these charismatic figures seem to have interesting childhoods. Why don't you tell us a little bit about his formative years? You do discuss that at length in the book, and how that kind of led, how that contributed to what he would become. Like, was he from a scholarly family already? He was already interested in Islamic studies and obviously madrasa studies, or how did his early life take shape that would then propel him to be in that silsila, to be ahead?
Sultan Ali Shah was coming from the Bichare family in Gunabadi in Khorasan. Not a particularly, he didn't come from a famous scholarly family, but he should first of all he became an orphan of father at 3 of age, but he showed interest for religion and for religious studies since his adolescence. He was schooled by relatives at home, and then he moved at the age of 17, I think, after finishing the cycle of studies of religious studies in Gunabadi. He moved to Mashhad, where he when he went through the whole cursus honorum of the Shi'i Alim, of the Shi'i Alim, up to the Dars-e Kharej. He became a mujtahid himself. But then he was attracted by the light of the superstar philosopher of Qajar, Iran, Mullah Hadi Sabzavari, in Sabzavar. And he traveled there. Becoming one of Sabzavari's students. Of course, Sabzavari was at the time the main interpreter of Ibn Arabi's thought and Mullah Sadra's philosophy in the Shi'i world. He was really a celebrity of philosophy in Qajar Iran. And by the way, in Qajar Iran, philosophy was a great deal. Hikmah, what was called Hikmah, was a great deal. It was part of the discourse of the elite. So Sultan Ali Shah went to study to the from the best. And of course, also Sabzavari has mystical elements to it. It's not just mere scholastic philosophy. Nothing about that. It was Neoplatonicist philosopher in the 12 Shi'i tradition. We can argue that Sultan Ali Shah, at the time when he was a student of Sabzavari, had already gained some sort of notoriety, because we know that in one of his he kept traveling between Iran, the Atabat in Iraq, Mashhad, and Tehran. But in one of his stints in Tehran, he was the target of an attempted murder, because the rumor had spread that he was a Babi. And of course, we know that Babi in the mid 19th century was problematic. Being a Babi was problematic in Iran in the mid 19th century. So we can argue that it was not just one random student of Sabzavari for being targeted with an attempted murder. So he fled from Tehran. He fled from Tehran and went back to Sabzavar, where he then happened to meet with the then Ni'matullahi master, whose tariqa name was Sultan Ali Shah, who was traveling across Iran and stopping by Sabzavar to have conversations with Mullah Hadi Sabzavari. And that is when he decided to follow Sultan Ali Shah, who, by the way, wasn't a trained mujtahid. He wasn't an alim. He was he was known as Tambaku Furush. He was a tobacco seller. So he had a trade, commerce,
you had mentioned
merchant upbringing. Yeah.
Arabic.
Sorry?
You had mentioned in the book that he didn't even know Arabic, or he was asked some questions in Arabic and he wasn't aware of the answers to them.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so soon he became, he was appointed as Sultan Ali Shah's successor. And by the way, just I say that by passing, most of his, a number of Sultan Ali Shah's works bear the name of Sultan Ali Shah. The Bayan Saada, then you have the Saudat Name, and other works by Sultan Ali Shah. Such was the impact that Sultan Ali Shah had on Sultan Ali Shah.
So with the time that we have left, which is not too much, but we have to get to the tafsir itself.
Yeah, okay.
Is the main work, his magnum opus, so to speak, of Sultan Ali Shah's Bayan Saada. Tell us a little bit about what makes this tafsir unique in the history of Shi'i tafsir. We don't have to go through the history of Shi'i tafsir, but what makes this particular work unique? Because the second half of your book is just on that.
Well, I would say, first of all, the intrinsic value of the work. I think that it should be read more than it is. It should be studied more than it is. It's an incredibly original and incredibly deep tafsir. The structure itself is, of course, it follows the surahs and verses of the Quran, but it does in a way that the tafsir itself reads as a long treatise, which is divided in thematic chapters, rather than which follow the order of the Quran, but it can be read as a treatise, an independent treatise. What makes it, what sets it apart from other tafsirs? What sets it apart is that is Sufi is probably the only tafsir which is entirely Sufi and entirely 12 verse Shi'is and 12 verse Shi, and that is where I think Sultan Ali Shah was original the most,
Yeah.
Because you really have everything. You have the classical tradition of Sufism. You have the entire tradition of Akhbari work of Quranic exegesis. So you have a robust use of the hadith of the Imams. You have references to classical Sufism, Rumi, Ibn Arabi. Curiously enough, Ibn Arabi is considered by Sultan Ali Shah almost infallible. So he literally says that Ibn Arabi cannot be wrong, which is something that resonates, by the way, with something that Haidar Amoli said at the end of his own criticism of Ibn Arabi's identification of the two seals of the walaya in Jesus and in himself. So he does that. He criticizes that. He says, no, the seals of the walaya are Imam Ali for the general walaya, and the 12 Imam, the Mahdi for the specific restricted walaya. And then after that he says,
did Gunabadi believe Ibn Arabi to be a Shi'i?
I don't think it's relevant. I think
curious. I mean, how would
I think
attributed such a thing to somebody who clearly Gunabadi believed in the maximal imamology?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the
he disassociated from the enemies or those who were perceived to be the adversaries of Ahlul Bayt from the very earliest period. So he is a bona fide Shi'i in that sense.
Yeah.
He makes that very clear. How does he reconcile? I'm just so curious about this, because we actually have a conference coming up on June 5th just on this subject. So this is absolutely fascinating, which is, does he try to reconcile this in the tafsir at all?
No, he doesn't. And no,
sorry to pigeonhole again. Again, the historian in me, just, of religions, is just so curious how this works,
Yeah, I know. I think that, but it is just my conjecture. I think that the issues that differentiates a Shi'i from a Sunni ultimately lose relevance in the light of the knowledge of the divine, of the esoteric knowledge. I think that would be, but it doesn't really go into detail about he was in fact a Shi'i. Yeah, of course, probably he would think that he was a Shi'i because he believed in the
walaya.
Yeah, in the walaya. Yeah. And in fact, the Tafsir Bayan Sa'ada is a tafsir about the walaya. Walaya is really the theme, one of the main themes of the tafsir. Everything tends to be brought down. So the ta'wil in this tafsir brings almost everything back to the walaya.
So like you said, it's very akhbari in that way, right? It's very bringing back that of what was already in the Safavid period, right? Tafsir Safi and there's other works really were wilayi, right? I mean, every other verse is about the Imam.
Yeah.
And Gunabadi is bringing that back, but from a different way, right? He's integrating into that.
Yeah. Can
you give an example?
To this,
that would be great. And then I think we can.
Okay, let me share the screen
on that. Yeah. That way we can conclude with with the sample of what he wrote. Yeah.
Sure. Reading that from, can you see it?
Yes, I can see it.
From my translation of Sultan Ali Shah's own introduction to the Tafsir, which is an introduction into 14 chapters, a clear reference to the 14th infallibles, and is a chapter on the Quran and the Imams. So, shall I read?
Yes, please. Go ahead.
Okay, the Quran as a whole was revealed about the 12 Imams. Because this is something that you find in early Shi'i Tafsir.
Al-Qummi Ayashi in the 3rd century.
It's on one hand, and on them, so the Imams, and their enemies on the other. Also, the Quran was revealed in thirds: 1/3 on them and their enemies, 1/3 on exemplary stories and parables, Sunan wa Amthal, and 1/3 on obligations and laws. From one respect. From another respect, 1/3 was revealed about the Imams, and those who profess love for him, or for them. 1/3 on their enemies, and 1/3 is exemplary custom and parable. Also, the Quran was revealed in fourths. 1/4 on the Imams. So this part paraphrases some hadith by the Imams that explains what the Quran was revealed about. So let it be known that
it has the wilaya and the bara'ah there side by side.
Exactly. Yeah. Let it be known that God, may he be exalted, was pure hiddenness and absolute unknown. He had no name, he had no form. So we have some apophatic theology here. He had no form and he had no predicate. Because of this, he has been named blindness. Then he wished to be known. So he created the creation in order for him to be known, as it is attested in a famous hadith Qudsi. So the famous hadith of the hidden treasure. And you can see here how the Shi'i and Sufi elements are merged. His first epiphany was his act, fi'al, also called the breath of the compassionate, nafas ar-Rahman, auroral effusion, station of the realization of knowledge, Muhammadan reality, that is the alid subtle reality, latifa alawiyya, with respect to its coming into being in God's afflatus toward creation. It is called will. With respect to its coming into being in the creation afflatus towards God, it is called absolute walaya. This reality, in keeping with the statement, I have created things through the will, unquote, or quote unquote, khalaqtul ashya bil mashia, is the origin of the whole creation in its various dimensions, that of the intellect, the soul, the body, light, darkness, and subtlety. The human being is the aim of creation of everything, and because, according to his words, I did not create the jinn and mankind except to worship me, and with the above mentioned saying that God created the world in order to be known, the aim of the human being is the knowledge of God. He sent the prophets, revealed the scriptures, and established the sacred laws in order for him to be known. Let me go to the end of this. Of this part. Okay. There is... No, I wanted to go here. Yeah. All the divine laws and the celestial scriptures have been established to rectify the path for humanity and direct the creation toward the walaya. Since Muhammad, Ali, and their offspring, the Halal Bayt, are the foundation for those who have realized the right path of humanity and walaya, and they are those who have truly realized the absolute walaya. It is therefore correct to say that all the divine laws and the celestial scriptures were revealed about them and about guiding humanity toward them, which at the same time is a way to venerate them. Many Quranic verses were revealed about them, be it in an explicit, allusive, or disguised fashion. There are, to be sure, verses revealed about their enemies, but they are only intended for their rejection. The verses are therefore an occasion for turning to them and acknowledging the height and immensity of their rank. Again, since the rest of the verses are about command, prohibition, stories, and narratives aiming at corroborating humanity's progression on the path toward walaya, it is correct to say that the whole Quran was revealed about them, about the Imams. So this is, in a way, one of the Imami foundations of
maximum imamology right here.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. This is, I mean, so, which is so fascinating. Again, Alessandro, Dr. Cani, Doctor, that this is, I think, what makes it very unique. You're a great example. Yeah, because he couldn't be accused of having a soft spot for those people that the Shi'is would repudiate. On the other hand, in this tafsir, he brings in, some of the ideas and methods and thoughts of Ibn Arabi, but clearly he's filtering, because Ibn Arabi would not have agreed necessarily with his disassociation from certain people.
Yeah.
So he's almost, he's walking this tightrope, but seems to have been pulling it off quite well here. So this is an excellent example. Thank you very much. Wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. I hope to have given a taste of
you
provided some
did.
framework for.
And I will be teaching, I'll be definitely assigning a chapter from this, at least, if not 2 chapters, to my students in our Tafsir course.
Good, I'm honored.
Yeah, I think so. No, because it's unique and it's 19th century, and we rarely talk about things modern other than like Al-Mizan. But I think that this work definitely was not modern, but pre-modern, but still, early.
Yeah, and it was widely read, and it had an impact. So the name of Sultan Ali Shah and the name of the tafsir was throughout the 20th century omitted, even by those who used that as a reference. It was a sensation when it came out, when it was first published. He circulated widely among those ulama who were interested in tafsir.
How many volumes is it published in now?
Sorry?
How many volumes is it in now?
4. It's 4 volumes.
Right?
Yeah,
okay.
It's 4 volumes.
Wonderful.
And famously, Ruhollah Khomeini, in his first lesson, his first televised lesson, tafsir lesson, he started to give, and then abruptly stopped, but he started to give about, on the commentary of the Quran, he mentions the Tafsir Bayan Asada among the great mystical tafsirs.
Wow. Very interesting. This is
some speculations go that this was one of the reasons why he was pressured to stop his tafsir, because he mentioned, this Sufi whose name was has been for the entire 20th century somehow taboo.
Well, yeah, because it's reconciling this whole notion of being a sheikh, and by sheikh I'm not talking about in the zahir sense, but in the batini sense, right? Which, of course, for the legalistic guild of ulama, or I'm not using that in a pejorative way, but for those that aren't particularly in that field, this is an affront to the imama. So anyhow, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
We really enjoyed having you on, and thank you to all the viewers for joining us and listening this far till the end. Visit our website, social media, and YouTube channel for more content. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please contribute to SRI to help drive more quality content in the future. And we hope you'll join us on our next episode. Goodbye for now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.